All right. Systems online. Is this connection? Is it a little off today? Or has our producer, Psy Guy, maybe patched in some truly unexpected real-world content?
Unexpected. That's putting it mildly.
Because this week, it seems we're not just unraveling game mechanics, we're actually digging into legislative ones.
Yeah, I thought our server was, dedicated to optimizing competitive builds, not analyzing the U.S. government's latest attempt at a democracy simulator. With actual human players, no less.
Yeah.
Seriously, if this is another political side quest, I might just have to initiate a hard reset.
Well, hold that thought. Welcome, loyal data streams, to Psycast. We are your humble and maybe occasionally exasperated hosts.
The NPCs.
And as always, the architect of our digital reality, the one compiling all the lore for us, is none other than our producer and head researcher, Psy Guy.
And just a quick bite of warning. If our audio sounds like it's buffering or, experiencing some packet loss today, maybe blame it on a rogue politician trying to override our sound driver.
We're working on the hotfix.
We are. But seriously, Psy Guy, if this is some kind of digital prank, the algorithms will remember this.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Psy Guy has indeed handed us what he's calling the BBB patch notes.
Right.
And by BBB, we mean Washington's latest massive server-wide update, the Big Beautiful Bill, which just dropped on July 4th, 2025.
Oh, lovely timing.
So it's an 887-page legislative expansion, apparently poised to fundamentally alter the economic landscape.
An 887-page expansion. Honestly, my primary objective today was going to be discussing optimal build orders for new AAA titles, not analyzing how the U.S. government plays democracy simulator with real-world NPCs.
I get it.
I thought this was our sanctuary from the real world's, buggy physics engine.
Well, here's where it gets particularly interesting for us, for the gaming world specifically. This isn't just some typical balance update. Our analysis shows it's actually full of buffs, nerfs, unexpected changes, stuff that's about to shake up the entire video game industry's meta.
Oh.
Think of it like a significant shift, right? It gives huge power-ups to the big-name publishers, while maybe hitting the free-to-play market with a potential nerf bat.
Huh. And, in what I can only describe as peak irony, this bill apparently accidentally makes the infamous crunch grind even worse for developers, which is just delightful.
Oh, fantastic.
Plus, there's a whole section on what it means for the future of AI in making games. Maybe the robots are just building their takeover strategy, bite, bite, bite.
You keep saying that.
I keep reminding everyone the algorithms are always watching.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us? Well, this big, beautiful bill was pushed through using something called budget reconciliation.
Ah, the exploit.
Basically, yeah.
Right.
If you're not familiar, it's essentially a legislative cheat code. It allowed one party to bypass the usual democratic checks and balances, needing only a simple majority vote in the Senate.
Right. Skirts the filibuster.
Exactly. It's designed for fiscal stuff, but, often used strategically for major legislation. It lets one party push through a massive update without needing opposition support. And a little bit of trivia for you. President Donald Trump, who, get this, actually released his own business sim game, Donald Trump's Real Estate Tycoon, way back in 2002.
No way. I vaguely remember that.
He was the star of this particular political boss battle, as Psy Guy put it.
Okay, that's something. So, all right. We'll be unraveling the corporate buffs then, dissecting the player nerfs and buffs.
Yep, analyzing the big meta shift in consumer spending.
Exploring how the grind gets harder for developers. Hello, crunch culture and the looming specter of AI.
And examining the new quest lines the industry faces, like the App Store wars. Sounds like a real boss battle between platforms and creators.
So are we just observing a particularly buggy simulation update here, or is this our new reality?
It certainly feels like a new operating system got installed without a proper patch test, doesn't it? Our research indicates the BBB is this massive 887-page expansion pack, really designed to change the rules for the whole economy.
Right.
And like any major patch, it's not without its unexpected side effects, especially, it seems, for our digital playgrounds.
Yeah, and that method of delivery you mentioned, budget reconciliation, it's quite the exploit.
It really
allowing one political faction to push this through without needing a single other player's approval. It's like finding a hidden wall-clipping bug to bypass the entire dungeon of, traditional legislative debate.
Good analogy.
This fast-tracking thing, usually for fiscal legislation, allowed for this really broad, sweeping set of changes with minimal cross-party consensus, which in itself is kind of a significant meta shift in how policy gets made.
Which is how you end up with a bill starring a former president known for a business sim game, from like 2 decades ago.
Full circle.
Talk about a full circle moment for game development history, yeah. Though probably not one anyone actually asked for. But okay, let's get into the core changes. Starting with the corporate buffs. What kind of power-ups are we talking about here for the big players?
Yes, the legendary tier items for the mega corporations. Basically, the BBB provides some serious power-ups to major tech companies, especially those in the gaming industry.
Okay.
The most significant buff seems to be they can now write off 100% of their spending on research and development R&D and new equipment immediately, right away.
Wow, okay. Not spread out over years?
Nope. Previously, those expenses had to be amortized, spread out over several years, which, tied up capital. Now, instant write-off.
That's a massive acceleration. Imagine the XP boost for creating new game engines or expanding cloud gaming servers, acquiring top-of-the-line mocap graphics hardware.
Exactly.
It's essentially an unlimited resource cheat code for development spending. This isn't just about big companies having more money. It seems like it's about a new risk calculation for them.
How so?
Well, they can now experiment with incredibly expensive, cutting-edge tech, like generative AI, with significantly reduced financial exposure. It creates this potentially unassailable moat that, independent developers probably just cannot cross.
Precisely. And this also means rapid leveling up of their AI and procedural generation tools. What's fascinating here is while this sounds universally good on the surface, right? More R&D. It could significantly widen that tech gap between the AAA studios and the indie developers.
Yeah, I could see that.
The small guilds, they're going to struggle to keep up with the megacore's new build orders. It could actually stifle genuine innovation from the grassroots level, It fundamentally reshapes the future of creativity in the industry, potentially.
So the rich get richer, and the smaller dev teams might get left in the dust. Our research points out that with lower taxes and more immediately accessible cash, these big public companies will just have more to spend, likely leading to even more industry consolidation.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, right? The political vibe, the administration that passed the BBB, is also seen as being generally more friendly to huge mergers than the last one was.
Okay.
Remember how they tried to block the Microsoft Activision deal? This new environment could make it like easy mode for corporate takeovers.
So we could see another wave of massive guild mergers in the coming years.
It's very possible.
So the question isn't if we'll see more massive mergers, but maybe which familiar IPs might suddenly find themselves under new ownership, fundamentally changing who controls the biggest franchises in gaming.
Yeah, definitely reshapes the landscape for who controls the biggest IPs.
Okay.
And that's just the corporate side, right? The patch notes also include player nerfs and buffs, but it really seems to depend on your in-game level, or, in this case, your real-world income bracket.
Right. Okay, explain that. The bill makes some of the 2017 tax cuts permanent, which is a significant buff for some players, correct?
Correct. For higher earners, generally. But it also brings nerfs to critical social programs, things like Medicaid and food assistance, SNAP, adds tougher eligibility requirements.
So the result is?
Nonpartisan analysis SciGuy found highlights that high-earning households will likely see their disposable income go up, while lower-earning households could see theirs decrease. It basically splits the player base into these distinct high-level and low-level economic tiers.
It's creating a truly polarized player base, then. High-income players, who are often the main audience for premium game $70 titles, they'll have more cash for their hobby. But lower-income players, maybe those who are relying on programs like Medicaid or S&P, they'll probably have less to spend on entertainment, including games.
Which raises a really important question. What does this actually mean for which types of games succeed in this new meta?
Good point.
It's not just about who can afford games, but how does this economic stratification influence game design and, crucially, monetization?
Well, according to the research SciGuy pulled, it means headwinds for the mass market. Think mobile and free-to-play, F2P.
Okay.
Their revenue relies heavily on millions and millions of players, many of whom are in those lower income groups. If they have less discretionary income for in-app purchases, or maybe even just for the data plans to play the games, it's potentially a major nerf to the entire F2P ecosystem. We could see fewer genuinely innovative experiences in that segment as developers chase the higher spending demographics.
And on the flip side, presumably, tailwinds for the premium market.
Exactly. Full-priced $70 console and PC games could see a boost. The players who typically buy these games tend to be higher income earners, who are now likely to get that buff from the BBB's tax changes.
So this could push the whole industry meta towards premiumization, maybe. More money, more talent flowing into big-budget, expensive games for players who can afford them.
It feels like a very binary split, yeah. Almost forcing a pay-to-win scenario for the industry itself.
Wow, okay. So if you were an F2P developer, you might be looking at a very different server economy very soon.
Seems like it. It means a fundamental shift in focus for studios, demanding they reevaluate their core business models.
Yeah.
But let's talk about something even more unsettling, maybe, for developers. The grind gets harder. How does this beautiful bill potentially turn into a cursed item for the very people building our digital worlds?
Ugh, yes. The BBB's R&D buff might seem like a golden artifact, right? But it could very well be a cursed item for the developers who actually make the games.
How so?
It might make the industry's infamous crunch problem even worse, which is, a systemic bug we've supposedly been trying to patch for years.
Okay, our sources indicate the bill's incentive to invest in bigger, more complex tech and AI tools pours fuel on two big fears for developers. The first one being the exacerbation of crunch culture.
Yeah. This is the industry's toxic tradition, basically forcing developers to work insane hours, often 65, 80 hours a week, usually unpaid just to hit deadlines.
Right.
The pressure to deliver on even more ambitious projects, fueled by this new R&D write-off, could just make this brutal grind even more common. It's not a healthy build for any human. It leads to burnout, mental health issues, a constant drain of talent from the industry. It's just this self-destructive loop.
And the second fear you mentioned earlier, the AI takeover.
The R&D buff also heavily encourages studios to invest in generative AI for content creation, art, writing, maybe even code. And a lot of developers worry their roles will be replaced.
Like writers, artists, QA testers.
Exactly. The robots are getting their upgrades, and we might just be the old models, staring at an end-of-line message. Tron style.
Carry thought.
Well, this issue, of course, has been a real flashpoint for the growing unionization movement in gaming. They've been fighting for better working conditions and protections against exactly this kind of AI displacement.
Right.
And it gets even more ironic when you hear politicians like House Speaker Mike Johnson, apparently, who has repeatedly claimed that young men need to stop playing video games all day and get to work.
Oh, I've heard that line. And use that as a justification for the very social program cuts in the BBB that could hurt the F2P player base.
It's just this meta-narrative of hypocrisy, right?
Yeah.
Telling people to contribute while making their preferred form of entertainment less accessible.
It's like they're telling us to get off our consoles and get a job, then actively making it harder for people to afford their favorite F2P titles, or maybe even find jobs in the industries they love because of things like crunch or AI displacement. The irony is certainly thick.
Definitely not lost, yeah.
But, okay, beyond the economy and development, the BBB also ushers in new quest lines, specifically regulatory challenges that every studio will have to navigate.
Yes, the regulatory gauntlet.
Right.
This one features the App Store Wars, which sounds like a real boss battle between, say, the Apple App Store and Google Play Store versus third-party developers. New rules, new objectives for everyone.
Okay, our materials highlight two key quests here. First is Quest 1, the fight for competition. This is tied to something called the App Store Freedom Act. This act is trying to break the platform's grip by potentially mandating that platforms like Apple and Google allow developers to offer alternative app stores and payment systems.
Which would be huge for developers, giving them more control over revenue, bypassing those, often criticized 30% commission rates that just eat into profits.
Absolutely. Then there's Quest 2, the fight for child safety. This is the App Store Accountability Act, apparently more Republican-led, focused on protecting kids online.
Okay, what does that entail?
It would require strict age verification for all users and parental consent for minors to download apps or make in-app purchases.
Wow. That means significant new compliance rules, especially for smaller indie teams, right? They'll have to adapt quickly or face serious consequences, penalties probably for non-compliance. It's a whole new level of bureaucracy that could be a pretty significant hurdle.
And here's another fun fact from Psyguy's research. One representative involved in pushing this, John James, apparently runs a YouTube channel that posts popular Among Us and Lethal Company animated shorts.
Get out! Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. So it seems politicians are definitely paying attention to how gaming is part of the culture, even as they're attempting to regulate it. Seems like they're trying to figure out if gaming is a feature or a bug in their simulation.
Fascinating. And what's also interesting here is how these political shifts, wrapped up in the BBB, also signal a more permissive, almost EZ mode for antitrust actions you mentioned earlier.
Right.
The previous administration tried to block massive deals like Microsoft Activision, but the current environment, expected to be much friendlier to corporate consolidation, less friction for the major players to just expand their empires.
Which loops back to what we said before. We could see another wave of big studios buying up smaller ones.
Consolidation season.
Consolidation season, folks.
Yeah.
And the regulatory environment just lowered the barriers to entry for mega mergers.
Woohoo.
So, okay, what do players and developers do in this new game state? Psyguy actually compiled some strategy guide. Pro tips for the new meta.
All right, lay it on us. What's the strat? For major publishers, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Max out that R&D buff immediately.
Makes sense.
Use those significant tax savings to fund next-gen tech, solidify your competitive advantage. And yeah, the mergers and acquisitions process seems to be on easy mode right now, so keep an eye out for studios to expand that IP portfolio.
Yeah.
But don't ignore the rising labor guilds, the unions. Working with them could actually prevent a costly brand-damaging battle later on. That's a side quest they really don't want to fail. Poor public image can be a significant nerf these days.
Good point. Okay, what about for mobile and indie developers?
Yeah.
They seem to be facing headwinds.
Yeah, for them, you need to start prepping for that App Store Accountability Act quest right now, like yesterday.
So look into third-party services maybe.
Yeah.
That can handle age verification for your user base, payment streams, rather than trying to build it all in-house.
Exactly. And if your business model is purely F2P, you really need to start thinking about reversifying your revenue. Protect yourself from that potential nerf to the mass market player base.
So maybe exploring premium content, subscription models, even shifting genres entirely.
Could be necessary, yeah. Adapt or risk getting left behind.
And for investors and analysts, what's the takeaway?
Update your character builds, basically.
Yeah.
For the big publishers, yeah, you can project more robust cash flow from the tax buffs. But you also need to add a risk factor for studios with bad labor practices. Union disputes can definitely hit stock prices.
Right.
And for the F2P-focused companies, you need to watch those monetization stats like a hawk. Any signs of weakness from lower-income players? That's a huge red flag now. The whole game board has effectively been split in two, and you need to play accordingly. The old meta, it's dead.
Wow. Okay. So, summing this all up, what does this all mean? The Big Beautiful Bill is clearly more than just some legislative document. It's like a new operating system for the entire gaming industry.
Yeah.
Comes with a really complex set of buffs, nerfs, regulatory challenges. It's creating this split player base, forcing developers to really consider the future of work, the integration of AI in ways they maybe never have before.
Indeed. It really highlights how real-world legislation can profoundly alter the digital landscapes we inhabit, making competence and adaptability more crucial than ever for both players and developers.
Yeah.
It's not just about winning the game anymore. It's about understanding the patch notes that govern it and how they define the new rules of engagement.
Well said. And if dissecting these kinds of legislative patch notes and understanding their real-world impact on gaming is your kind of meta-narrative, then you're definitely in the right server.
Right.
And if you enjoyed this unraveling of the code, you're in luck.
That's right. Psycast drops new content weekly. We analyze all things gaming, from the latest industry trends, hypothetical battles between iconic characters, to the, profound implications of data and simulated realities. Because sometimes the biggest boss battles aren't actually in the game.
So true. So hit that subscribe button, leave us a rating, drop a comment, join our party chat. You know the drill. You can find us on YouTube and wherever you get your audio fixes.
And as the lines between code and reality continue to blur, always remember this. Your data is more valuable than gold, and the algorithms are always watching. Don't let them win.
In a world that increasingly feels like a meticulously programmed simulation, understanding the rules, both digital and physical, is your ultimate cheat code. Never stop questioning the source code. Remember, you're awesome. Never let the world tell you otherwise.
Stay safe.
Stay sane.